Welcome to End User Tools presents Spotted Lanternfly for Otis Laboratory Sentinel Trapping data collection, which uses the ArcGIS Field Maps application. That's kind of a mouthful, but I want to make sure you know you're in the right spot. I'm Jenny Sauer. I'm a mobile solutions specialist with the USDA APHIS PPQ End User Tools Group. My group configures these apps, and then I try to train people on how to use them. This is a map that was used last year, but has had some updates for this year. For those who used it last year, you're going to find it very familiar, even though we're in a new application, Field Maps. So I want to put a couple links in the chat real quick before we even move along and give you a couple resources. Firstly, this mobile solutions, mobile data collection tools website has all kinds of solutions supporting the training side of things. So this main page, the top half of it has itself dedicated to documents that support it. For instance, you might have found this event here. The training events page has events that are coming up, and there's Spotted Lanternfly, and here's today's login. If I go back a page, you'll find pest program specific training documents and Spotted Lanternfly, and specifically here's SLF Sentinel Trapping. There is a user manual and a quick reference here for you guys. The quick reference is like the cheat sheet you might bring out in the field. It's just one page and it just kind of sums up everything that you need to know about collecting data. So if you want to keep these handy, you're welcome to open them alongside things. Going back to that main page, so that top half is all document oriented, but the bottom half is all videos. And you will find this video training if you want to review it later, or if you need to share it out to someone who missed this training live. It will show up here in this video gallery. Give me about a week to get it up, but it will show up, I promise. And it's going to be under this category, pest program. It'll be listed here. You could search by name if you wanted, or you could just tap here on pest program and you'll find these are all the trainings that have been given this year so far, including another SLF training. So your training will show up here if you want to review that. The second link that I popped into your chat box there is a quiz, and no pressure on the quiz. The reason why I give you the link now is so that you can go ahead and take it along with me if you want. I really don't mind. In fact, I kind of encourage it. The quiz itself is meant to be like a little knowledge check, and you can feel free to do this along the way as we talk today. The third question here, email address. If you put in this email address, which you have to enter manually, so do that carefully, this question 3 is what automates an email back to you that says you completed this course. So feel free to take this quiz. You'll get an email saying, congratulations, you completed this training. For some supervisors, this is something that they'd like to see so that they know that you've been trained fully. Sometimes I just like to keep these in a folder on my desktop so that I know what I've done through the year. Whatever that does for you, feel free to keep those in your back pocket. But the quiz itself also helps me measure whether I'm communicating out what I need to you all, and whether you're getting the answers that you need out in the field. So please feel free to take this quiz along the way while everything is still fresh in mind. So those two resources are in the chat box. What are we going to talk about today? I do have somebody in the field that's saying that they're having trouble with volume on the iPad. The volume button is on the side of the iPad. It's like 2 buttons together, up or down. You could try toggling that up. Maybe you've got something going on there with your iPad. Otherwise, I can't say for sure what's happening calling in on your iPad. You might try another device or signing out and back in. Sometimes that helps that volume thing, I hope. Anyway, that was a question privately to me, but I just want to make sure I get that out to you all. Okay, so we've got a few resources. I'm going to turn off my camera so I'm not distracting myself or you, and I would welcome you to do the same. And let's jump into what we're going to talk about today. This is our list of objectives. I mentioned that Field Maps is the application being used, and I'll say that we'll talk about that a little bit. Today, the new app. We're going to talk about a new enterprise URL. Signing into the ArcGIS Field Maps application requires that you enter a URL, and it's new this year from last year. It's documented in those documents that I told you about, and we're going to look at that. End User Tools makes a copy of the real map. I'm making air quotes in the air here, so that you can practice in a training map. And those training maps are held in a different URL. So we'll talk about that. We're going to just overview the fact that you can do this whole thing while disconnected from the Wi-Fi and what that workflow looks like. We're going to look at the data form. I have my iPad here and I'll show you what that looks like. And then we're going to review some caution areas, some things to take special note of. So what is this new app? Field Maps has its own introduction and training. I've got a little preparedness poll here that I'm going to go ahead and end, but I see many of you have taken advantage of some of that training. So Field Maps has training, a video series. There are 10 little videos that you can kind of take little bites out of. It looks like some of you are taking advantage of that. And there's also a user guide that you can use to follow along with that video series or use as a reference. So please make sure, if you haven't already, just make sure that you feel comfortable with Field Maps. But that being said, it's really built on an application that you may already be familiar with. This is the company that makes these applications. Esri is the name of the company. Their explanation is that it is really built upon the collector application. So some of you may have used that last year, but it's pulling functionality in from these other 4 mobile apps. And these are all going away to make this one robust Field Maps application. So it's going to look very much like that collector application if you used it in the past. There's not much different in the look and feel, but there's a few more functions, many of those on the back end really that only my team would know about. And I will say that our team has gone really light on using new applications at all, so that hopefully you in the field really just see things as you would expect. And nothing too new or too scary there. But that's basically what Field Maps is. And it's probably going to grow in some functions as time passes. So signing in to ArcGIS Field Maps kind of looks like this when you first get into it. It's got the option to sign in with ArcGIS Online and the option to sign in with ArcGIS Enterprise. And in PPQ, we only ever will use this ArcGIS Enterprise portal sign in. So that will always be what you'll tap here, the Enterprise option. And that's because our Enterprise portal is FedRAMP moderate protected. It's secure. We can add sensitive data or PII to this portal. So it will always be Enterprise as how we sign in to that portal. Once you've hit that sign in with ArcGIS Enterprise, you'll have something kind of similar to this. On first sign in, you'll see only these bottom two options: specify a new URL or scan code. And you'll want to tap specify a new URL. Ever after, it kind of holds on to it. So you see here, I've got this URL just kind of waiting for me, and I can just go ahead and tap that. And that is the official Enterprise URL portal for collecting data. Now, I mentioned earlier on the outset that we also have training maps that are held in a separate one. So this slide kind of breaks those down. The top one being the official data collection portal. And I'm just going to give you a couple boxes so you can see the difference. It's got maps.mrp, so it's the USDA MRP managed portal, and that is where official data is collected. And then the training maps are held here. It's maps-stg, still .mrp, but we've got this STG, and STG is a shortened version for stage. So imagine this is like a staging environment where this top official data collection portal is the production portal. So the big caveat here is if you're in a training map and playing around, and we want you to, in fact, today, my demonstration, I will use the training map because we don't want to add data to a map that's a real one when we're playing around and learning learning things. So the big caveat is be sure that you are using the official data collection enterprise portal when entering official data, and be sure you're in a training map when entering non-official play, demo, practice, exercise, making yourself comfortable. So make sure no real data ends up in the training map and vice versa. No training data ends up in a real map. Just be sure that you're signed into the right portal. And the way to do that, I'm just going to say, when in doubt, sign out. If you're not sure where you are, sign out. That being said, there's a lot of key indicators when you're in this stage portal. Our training maps all have really boring background base maps. There's no imagery. It's just a kind of a light gray, boring thing. They all are named training, all caps in the title. And so there's a couple of hints there for you, and I'll show you what that looks like too when we get to that. The disconnected workflow. It's a really cool feature of Field Maps as a mobile app that it is specifically designed to operate well disconnected from Wi-Fi. And this is a really great thing when you're out in the field. Even if you are using an iPhone, sometimes cellular data or cell towers are just not in the cards for you. You could be kind of in a rural area where you're not hitting those. And the disconnected workflow requires a little bit of preparation, but then works quite nicely. And this kind of breaks it down. While you're connected to Wi-Fi, you download a map area, an area of interest, which kind of lives on your device as a little copy that you check out. And then you can go ahead and disconnect out from Wi-Fi, go on out, collect data in that downloaded map area all day, come back to your Wi-Fi connection and synchronize that data. And that synchronization of data is a two-way sync. So others who've been adding data to that same area, those data points will be pulled into your map, and your data points will be pushed back up to that hosted map service in that enterprise portal. So it's a really cool thing you can use, and wanted to make sure that we're pointing that out to you. Trapping workflows. So there's a couple of workflows to trapping and the way that they're recorded in a mobile application. Basically, the first visit to a location where you would place that trap and install it, that first visit we call placing a trap. It places that point on the map. It gives it a symbol on the map, and there's a data form that you fill out on that location that's being captured, including the idea that you've installed a trap at that location. And that's done by, there's just a field on that initial data form that says data install date. And that indicates you installed a trap on that first visit. But then all future visits are really monitoring that same location, monitoring that trap, and all of those future visits are on the same location, but they get a little related table form, and we call that a trap activity form. And that has its own little data form, which is shorter, just a few questions on the activity performed while you're there. These are pretty simple. The first visit places the location, all other visits are monitoring that location. Sometimes it gets a little confusing. Maybe you have to relocate a trap. And so we'll go over that workflow just a little bit. Relocating a trap, the original location has to have 2 entries. Number 1, well, actually for Sentinel, there's only 1 entry. A lot of traps keep track of the trap status. But for Sentinel, the trap activity would be that you've removed the trap. And where it gets tricky is a lot of folks feel that once they've entered this remove entry, data entry, that point on the map should disappear. And in fact, it's correct that the symbol should remain. And the reason for that is it's important to data capture. The entire history of that trap location is recorded and retained on that symbol. So what you should see is the trap symbol remain on the map, but the last trap activity would be it was removed. And then you can go ahead and walk to the next point, to the new location, and you'd start at the beginning in placing that trap. So the one thing I wanted to point out here that's unique to Sentinel data capture, you won't see that. Well, it's not unique to your capture. It's unique to kind of the thought process, I think, because you want to think that you've removed it and it's not going to remove. It'll stay put, but your last trap activity should indicate that last activity of you removed the trap. So that gets a little tricky. Let me show you what that looks like. The data form on for Sentinel. Let me pull over my camera here and give you a view of my iPad. And this is a PPQ iPad, so it's been configured with all of these field maps, but also all these field survey applications that PPQ uses. So you'd want to go ahead and if you have a PPQ iPad, this is what you should see kind of pop in automatically. I'm going to look for that field maps application and just tap it to open. And Field Maps does hold on to your sign-in. In fact, it tries to go all the way back to the last map you were in. So I'm going to go back twice to that main maps page. And because I was already signed in, I remember because I signed into that stage or that training portal. I'm aware that I signed into the correct one, but remember, when in doubt, sign out. And in order to sign out, I'll just tap this profile menu and I'd scroll up and there's my sign out. So if you're in doubt for any reason, make sure that you sign out and sign into the proper portal, so we don't get that training versus real data mix-up happening. I can point out, I'm sure you're already noticing there's training all over the place. So I'm pretty sure I'm in this training or stage portal. I see it in the thumbnails that it says training. I see it in the title of the map in all caps. And also all of our training maps are held in this PPQ End User Tools training group. So if I see this group, I know I'm in that stage portal. And this is the group that you would need to be a member of in order to get access to this training map, if that's what you want. So I've gone ahead and I've downloaded a map area already for the training version of the PPQ SLF Sentinel Trapping field map. And I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. And you can see I've been playing around a little bit. I've got a few points here sitting already on the map. And remember, all the way in, I can still check this map title and it says training. So I'm okay to play. So it's a good thing to make sure of at any point. We have a few icons up here along the top. This is our sync icon, these two arrows here. And I do want to point out that I do have auto sync disabled, and I do this on purpose and highly recommend it, even if you are out in the field collecting data well connected. This auto sync will just automatically decide to sync your data as you go. And this is kind of dangerous because the #1 reason that a sync fails usually is a poor Wi-Fi connection. So we like to keep that in your control and make sure that you're back to a location that you have a reliable Wi-Fi network that you feel confident will be able to synchronize all of your data. And then you would normally hit this sync now button. So I recommend this to be disabled, this auto sync disabled, and you could just toggle that on or off just like that. But you can see I don't have any pending edits right now, so I'll X out of that. And then this is our layers menu. And Sentinel has the previous year's trap sites. Last year we called it insecticide trap sites available. I'm over here in Colorado, so I don't probably have any, but in order to make that visible, you just go ahead and tap that layer and they're both visible. And I'm going to leave that there and show you this 3-dot, or sometimes we call it the overflow menu, has a few other options here, including the legend. And the legend will show you all of the layers that you leave visible. So that's why I left that one visible for you. You can see what last year's trap sites would be symbolized by on the map. It'd be a purple triangle here. And yeah, it's true, there's no purple triangles in my area, so we don't see any on the map. But the legend might help you out determining what these symbols mean in case you need that. Back to the overflow menu. A new feature now specific to ArcGIS Field Maps is this markup layer. And the markup layer, I'm going to go ahead and tap, can be useful. You can see I've added some drawings here. You can go ahead and draw on the map. You can make little notes. You can add a label. I can see a lot of uses for this. You can add an area or a point. I've got a little point here. Maybe it's a good spot to have lunch. Maybe you want to mark where there's a kind of barky dog or a mean owner or anything of that nature. I could see lots of uses for this markup layer. There are two kind of caveats. I just drew a little line there that I can add. or I can go ahead and erase that. So 2 caveats to this markup layer. As you can see, we turned it on. I can go ahead and hit done and it's off again. The markup layer, number 1, is not an official data collection layer. So no comments that would normally belong in your data form should end up in the markup layer. The markup layer is not an official data collection layer. That's rule 1. Rule 2, the markup layer really lives on your device. It's like your little side notebook that you get to mark up the layer. So it's private to the device unless you share it. And I remained connected to Wi-Fi so that I could show you. This little share button here allows me to take a screenshot image of just what I see here to share, or the entire layer. And if I share the entire layer, I get the option to, right now, share that to ArcGIS Enterprise as a layer. So it can be shared that way, or perhaps you find another way that you share it. Check with your supervisor, check with your team, and make sure that you're using this correctly if that's something you want to use. But it is a new option here in Field Maps to use the markup layer. Just 2 rules. It's not an official data collection layer. And secondly, it's kind of like writing in your diary, really. It's like your little notebook unless you share it. So I'd love to hear if you find a good use for that, but that's new to Field Maps. Now, how about this form? To add data, remember there's place a trap and then a trap activity. So to place a trap or add data, there's a little add button here in the bottom right. And if I tap that, our Sentinel trap sites question first asked what type of trap site, whether it's negative, positive, or undetermined. And I'm going to go ahead and do positive to start, and then that opens our data form. Now it placed that symbol right under me, which makes it a little hard. So for the sake of this demo, I'm going to move that out here and move myself away. So that's our trap site that we're placing right now. And you can see the form has some gray asterisks that indicate required fields. The trap type and lure is always the same, so that's visible there, but you can't edit it. It's not editable. There are some defaults, pest status pulled in from that first question, and the trap status here is active. And so in fact, you can, Sentinel, I'm sorry, I was wrong, does also update active or inactive traps. And so in order to fill out this form, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly go for it. You would complete this data based on survey protocol. I don't know anything about that, so I'm going to drive you nuts. Oops. By just entering some test information. I'm going to leave that blank. Okay, now you probably already can tell me I've missed a field that's required, but this submit button is saying go ahead. It's got a blue hue to it, and it seems as if I can go and do that. I'm going to hit submit. And you can see I immediately got some messaging here that one attribute, or what they're saying is one of these fields failed. And I got a little required in red under it. If this is a longer form and I tap view, it will kind of bring that up for me into view. And now I know I need to enter the install date. And tapping the install date, if I go back a few months, it is restricted to this year. So if I go back far enough, I'll find that I can't choose any dates here. Something that I do by accident often with these calendar views is tap something when I'm trying to scroll. And so if you find that you've gotten off of the correct date, you can hit this blue today, just give that a tap, and you can see it goes right back to today. And another helpful feature is if you tap this field one more time, it closes that calendar view and kind of locks in your date. I like that because, as I said, I tend to fat finger a little bit on those calendars. And then I'll just give it a quick check over. Yes, everything looks good. And now I can submit. And so we've placed that trap. Now let's say we're going to visit another location. I'm going to close that up. And in order to record a trap activity, let's say we're visiting this guy here, I'm going to tap the symbol on the map to select it, which opens the data form over here. And in order to add a trap activity, I can either tap this link symbol or scroll up, find that link symbol again, and you can see it's titled SLF Sentinel Trap Activities for this year 2022. And I'll tap that and we can see we get a little form that allows me to see the history of that trap. It was monitored on April 28th. I'm going to add a trap activity. And here's that trap activity form. And I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through and do the same thing we did before. Quickly enter. The options are monitor or remove. I'm monitoring again. I'm going to say 0 for all of these counts. I know you guys are watching me to make sure I complete all of these fields that need a field. Again, the activity date is today, and I'm going to close that up. I'll give it one more look-see over and submit. So it's just that simple to monitor a trap site and enter that trap activity on that site. Now remember that relocation workflow is a little complicated. The original site, you would want to go ahead and record a remove trap activity. We want to update that trap status to inactive and then go ahead and place the new trap. So let's say this one needs to move for whatever reason. Maybe it needs to be over here. That would be a better place for it. We would go ahead and perform that trap activity, add, and we would make that, I'm going to go ahead and fill this out. We would make this activity remove. I'm going to enter 0, 0 next, 0 next, 0 next. That's a nice handy way to get through those, and update the date to today. So our last activity is remove, but now we also want to update the status of this trap to inactive, which was, remember, on the original data form. So we'll have to exit out of the activities, back to the original data form where we have that field trap status. And now we have the ability to edit either this pencil down here or scrolling up. You might have seen edit as an option. And we're going to scroll down to that trap status, update that to inactive, and submit. So now the original point, the last activity was remove. The trap status is now updated to inactive. And now we'd go about our business walking to that new location and hitting this add button to add that new trap site. So that's what that looks like from the form side of things. So a couple of things to really take note of. We've really talked about this all, but I just want to hit them one more time to make sure that we're hearing them. There are 2 sign-in options when you sign into ArcGIS Enterprise. It looks kind of like maps.mrp and maps-stage.mrp. Be sure that you are in maps.mrp when you are entering official data, and be sure that you're using a training map for playtime or for adding practice points and all of that. Just be sure you're in the right URL. Just a reminder, we went over that disconnected data collection workflow. The submit button will give you kind of little hints if you're missing something. We saw together that there was a required field that was missing. Be extra careful with data collection. I know this is kind of a silly thing to remind you of, you know what you're doing, but always take one more time to check over that data form for errors or for missing pieces or maybe consistency. Just be careful, give it that one more look over before submitting it. The daily data sync, we talked about not letting the data sync automatically. So be sure that you're doing that daily. In fact, we recommend twice a day before you go out in the field and then in the evening when you return, just to keep both your map and that hosted map service up to date. And then remember the markup layer, the 2 rules of the markup layer. It is not an official data collection layer, so don't enter official data in that markup layer. If you do use it, remember it's just held on your device unless you share it out. So it really does remain a private feature. Now we talked about kind of a lot, but there are some ways for you to get more help. We have a couple of Spotted Lanternfly program contacts here. Matthew Travis, Nevada is still, I think, someone that you can turn to if you need some help. If you have a problem with an iPad or your iPhone that's PPQ related, you can open a ticket with CECIT. Portal access can be tricky, and there's a couple of options here. You would want to go to your supervisor first, but they have support from the local field GIS specialist. And this email address is how you would request access to the group that your map is shared with. So if you don't see your map, you would email this webgis.connect email address. All things training, remember, and please bookmark that mobile data collection tools webpage. You'll find updates there frequently, and it's just a good place to resort to whenever you feel a little confused. You'll find a video there. Don't forget the quiz. Remember, that's going to give you a little email automation that tells you you've completed this course. And the things that we talked about today, we talked about that new app. We talked about the 2 URLs to be careful of. We overviewed that disconnected workflow. We took a look at the data form and performed some of those trapping workflows together. And we went over some of the caution areas for you to be especially concerned with and really take note of. I always want to leave you with my information. You have a lot of folks that you can turn to, and I know that you're smart people and you know what you're doing, and many of you have done this for years now, collected this data. But if you find that you need help or there is something I haven't covered, please feel free to reach out to me. This is my information, and I do want to hear from you. We're always trying to make our training better and more pointed. So with that, I'll say my training side of things is over. And I know that went really fast. I will plan to stay on. We still have a pretty small group, but I'll plan to stay on about 10 minutes. And if you have any questions or there's anything you'd like to see again, please feel free you are welcome to speak up. If you feel comfortable, you can feel free to type something in the chat box or raise your hand. Any of those things is totally welcome in this setting. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.